I hadn't planned on staying long that evening. My friend had invited me over for dinner, and after a long day, I figured it would be just another casual night, food, jokes, maybe a late movie. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. The house was warm, alive with chatter at first. His younger siblings were running through the living room, voices overlapping with the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. It smelled of roasted garlic and herbs, a homely scent that always seemed to linger in their home. My friend drifted off to help his dad in the garage, and suddenly, I found myself standing in the kitchen doorway alone with his mom. She was rinsing plates at the sink, her movements unhurried, graceful. There was something quietly commanding in the way she carried herself, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself, but you feel it anyway. She glanced over her shoulder at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Could you grab the glasses from the top shelf?" she asked. Her tone was casual, but I felt my pulse quicken. I nodded quickly, stepping toward the cupboard. My hands, for reasons I couldn't explain, suddenly felt clumsy. Reaching up, I almost knocked one glass against another, the faint clink sounding louder than it should have in the otherwise quiet kitchen. She turned at the sound, amused. "Careful," she said lightly. "I'd hate for you to break the good ones." I managed to laugh, though it came out a little too quick, too thin. "Yeah, no pressure, right?" She let out a soft laugh of her own, a sound that warmed the space more than the oven ever could. It wasn't mocking, just observant. And in that laugh, I felt something shift. I handed her the glass, trying not to notice the way my fingers brushed against hers, but noticing anyway. Her skin was warm, steady, while mine felt almost trembling by comparison. She raised an eyebrow, studying me with a curious tilt of her head. "You're nervous," she said softly, not as a question, but as if she'd simply read the truth aloud. And then, with a light chuckle that seemed to land directly in my chest, she added, "That makes you even cuter." The words froze me for a second. I wasn't sure if she meant it as a joke, a tease, or something else entirely. But the way her eyes lingered, just a fraction longer than necessary, made me wonder. I laughed it off, trying to hide how flustered I felt, but inside, every nerve was awake. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the hum of the refrigerator louder, the distance between us shorter. And in that ordinary moment, handing over a glass, standing too close, her words echoing in my head, I realized the night wasn't going to be as simple as I thought. I tried to laugh it off, but the truth was written all over me. My hands still felt a little shaky, my voice a touch too quick, like I was trying to outrun the silence. She didn't press, though. Instead, she just gave me this knowing look, the kind of look only someone older, wiser, more composed could give. The kind of look that saw straight through me. She set the glasses down on the counter, close enough that her arm brushed mine for the briefest second. I felt the warmth of it long after she'd pulled away. She picked up a dish towel, drying her hands slowly, deliberately, almost as if she was giving me time to catch my breath. "You know," she began, her tone light, playful. "I don't usually get this reaction when someone helps me in the kitchen." I tilted my head, trying to sound casual, though I knew my grin was betraying me. "What reaction?" She folded the towel neatly, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. There was the faintest spark in them. The nervous kind. The glass almost slipped right out of your hand. She paused just long enough to make me squirm, then let out a soft laugh. "You're nervous. That makes you even cuter." The words landed like a gentle strike, not harsh, not heavy, but impossible to ignore. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I tried to answer with something witty, something to brush it off, but all I managed was a quiet, "Yeah, well. I wasn't expecting an audience." She laughed again, richer this time, the sound filling the kitchen in a way that felt warmer than the light above us. She shook her head slightly, like she was humored by me, but not unkindly. If anything, her amusement felt like an invitation, a way of saying it was okay to stumble, okay to be seen. I leaned against the counter, trying to regain a little balance, though my heart was still racing. "So, do you always call people out like that?" I asked, half teasing, half genuinely curious. Her smile softened. She looked at me for a moment, longer than polite conversation usually allowed. "Only when I notice something worth mentioning," she said. The words hung there, subtle but loaded, like a string pulled just tight enough to hum. I swallowed, glancing at the clock though I had no idea what time it actually was. Everything felt slower, stretched out. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint clatter of laughter from the living room, her eyes still holding mine, it was as though the world had narrowed to just this, her playful tease, my nervous grin, the unspoken current moving between us. For the first time that night, I stopped trying to hide how flustered I was. Because the truth was, I liked the way she noticed. I liked that she saw through me, and instead of turning away, she smiled. After that moment, the rest of the house seemed to fade into background noise. I could still hear faint laughter from the living room, the low hum of the television, the occasional shuffle of footsteps upstairs, but here in the kitchen, it felt like a different world altogether. She leaned casually against the counter, arms crossed now, though there was nothing defensive in her posture. If anything, she looked relaxed, maybe even curious. I shifted my weight, trying not to look as restless as I felt. "So," she said, tilting her head slightly, "what's going on with you these days?" I don't think I've really had the chance to ask. I wasn't expecting the question. Most adults I knew stuck to small talk, school, work, weather. But the way she asked, it didn't feel like polite filler. She actually wanted to know. I shrugged at first, but then the words started coming before I could stop them. "I guess I've been trying to figure things out. What I want to do, where I'm heading. Some days I feel like I've got it together, other days, not so much." She listened. Really listened. Her eyes didn't wander, her expression didn't drift. She rested her chin lightly on her hand, her elbow propped on the counter, and for a moment I forgot I was talking to my friend's mom. She didn't feel like someone filling a role. She felt present. "That makes sense," she said after a pause, her voice soft, steady. "It's not easy at your age. You're expected to already have a plan, to know exactly where you're going. But the truth is," she gave a small shrug, "most of us don't figure it out until much later. And even then, it keeps changing." Her honesty caught me off guard. I looked at her, really looked, noticing the faint lines around her eyes, the calm strength in her presence. She wasn't speaking to impress me, or to lecture. She was just telling the truth. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm behind. Like everyone else has it figured out and I trailed off, suddenly self-conscious." Without thinking, she reached out and touched my forearm. Just a light brush of her fingertips, but it was enough to steady me. "You're not behind," she said gently. "You're just human. And trust me, that's more than enough." The touch lingered only for a second, but it felt like an eternity. My chest tightened, not from nerves this time, but from something deeper. I managed to smile, small but real. "Thanks. I didn't think you'd be the one giving me a pep talk tonight." She laughed softly. "Oh, I've got plenty more where that came from." Her laughter, her words, the way she looked at me, it all felt like a door had quietly opened. A door I hadn't even known was there. The rest of the evening drifted forward in a kind of blur. My friend eventually reappeared, we all sat around the dinner table, conversations weaving back and forth. To anyone else, it was an ordinary night, laughter over stories, passing dishes, the clatter of silverware. But for me, something had changed. I kept catching myself noticing her. The way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. The graceful tilt of her head when she listened. Even the way she set down her fork, calm, deliberate, as though she was never rushed by anything. She wasn't trying to stand out, but she did anyway. And every now and then, her gaze found mine. Just for a second too long. Just enough to remind me that our earlier conversation hadn't been imagined. After dinner, people spread out into their own little corners of the house. My friend headed upstairs to grab something, his siblings disappeared into their rooms, and once again, I found myself in the living room, beside her. The television was on, some show neither of us was really watching. She sat at one end of the couch, I at the other, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the distance began to shrink. She shifted, tucking one leg beneath her. Then she leaned a little closer, as if to catch a joke from the screen, though I doubted she was paying any more attention to it than I was. The space between us narrowed until our shoulders were nearly touching. And then, casually, like it meant nothing at all, her sleeve brushed against mine. I felt it instantly. That soft graze of fabric, the warmth beneath it. It could have been nothing, an accident, an unconscious movement. But she didn't pull away. And neither did I. Instead, I found myself leaning in, not enough to be obvious, but just enough to match her closeness. We talked quietly, not about anything serious this time. Movies, travel, little things we'd always wanted to do but never had. She laughed at one of my clumsy jokes, her hand briefly resting on the cushion between us, her fingers so close I could almost feel the heat of them against my own. And then it happened again, that subtle electricity, the kind you can't fake or force. Our knees brushed together when she shifted. She didn't move them away. I glanced at her, and for a moment, our eyes caught. The television flickered light across her face, but her attention was entirely on me. There was a pause, brief but heavy, where neither of us spoke. The air felt thick with something unnamed. She broke it first, clearing her throat softly, eyes flicking back to the screen. But even then, the closeness remained. The distance we'd started with was gone. And in its place was something fragile, magnetic, and alive. The closeness between us sat heavy in the air. Every second on that couch felt like a thread being pulled tighter, stretched until it might snap. I could feel her presence in every detail, the faint perfume that lingered near her, the warmth radiating from where her knee brushed mine, the quiet rhythm of her breath. And then, just as naturally as it had built, she pulled away. She stood abruptly, smoothing the fabric of her blouse as though it suddenly needed straightening. "I should tidy up a little," she murmured, already crossing the room toward a shelf that didn't look the least bit out of order. Her hands busied themselves with arranging a frame, dusting at nothing, anything to put distance between us. I stayed where I was, though my chest ached with the shift. Her silence was louder than any words. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice lighter than before, too light, like a mask. "You know this," she gestured vaguely between us, still facing the shelf. "This can't mean anything. You're my son's friend." The words stung, though I understood them. They were practical, sensible, the kind of words any responsible person would say. But behind them, I heard something else, the faint tremor of hesitation, of someone trying to convince herself as much as me. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I know. I mean, I respect that. I respect you." I paused, staring at the floor for a moment before lifting my eyes to her. "But I can't ignore what I feel either. Not after tonight." She froze in place, her hand resting on the edge of a picture frame. Her shoulders rose and fell with a careful breath, but she didn't turn around just yet. The seconds stretched out, each one pressing heavier on my chest. Finally, she looked over her shoulder. Her eyes softened when they found mine, but they were clouded too with conflict, with rules, with everything that made this complicated. "You're too young to understand how messy this is," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "Maybe. But I understand enough to know it's real." The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each sound a reminder of time slipping past. I noticed it was edging closer to midnight, though the room felt timeless, caught in its own suspended moment. She sighed, her hand dropping from the shelf as she finally turned fully toward me. Her expression was unreadable, part frustration, part tenderness. "You make this harder than it should be," she said quietly. I rose to my feet, but didn't step closer. I just stood there, letting the space between us hum with everything unsaid. "Maybe that's because it's not supposed to be easy," I replied softly. Her lips parted, as if to answer, but no words came. She simply stood there, caught between the door she wanted to close and the one she couldn't quite lock. The air between us was thick, charged with everything neither of us dared to say out loud. She stood near the hallway now, one hand resting lightly on the frame of the door as though it might anchor her. I could see the hesitation written all over her, in the way she shifted her weight, in the faint crease between her brows, in the way her eyes flickered toward me and then away again. The clock ticked on. 11:30. Each minute seemed louder than the last, the sound echoing through the quiet house. She let out a breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "This is crazy," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "I shouldn't even be standing here." I took a slow step closer, careful not to break the fragile line she was walking. My voice was steady, though my pulse hammered in my chest. "Then why are you?" Her eyes met mine, just for a second, and the look there nearly undid me. It wasn't annoyance or dismissal. It was longing. Real, unguarded longing, wrapped tight in fear. She shook her head slightly, almost as if trying to break the spell, but her hand lingered on the doorframe instead of turning the knob. "Because part of me doesn't want to walk away," she admitted softly. The words slipped out like a confession she hadn't meant to speak. I stopped a few feet from her, not daring to close the space completely. The choice wasn't mine to make. I could only stand there, heart pounding, waiting. The house was silent except for the faint creak of wood settling in the night. Every detail etched itself into my memory: the glow of the lamp spilling into the hallway, the faint scent of her perfume, the way her breathing faltered as I drew near. I whispered, "I don't want to push you. But I can't pretend I don't feel this." Her eyes softened, her hand lowering from the frame. For a moment, it looked like she might step closer, might let go of the weight she carried. But then she caught herself, pressing her lips together. "If anyone knew," she began, then cut herself off, shaking her head again. The clock struck 11:45. The sound made her flinch, as though reminding her of a line she had drawn long before tonight. "I locked my door at midnight," she murmured almost absently, echoing the words she'd spoken earlier that evening. This time, though, they weren't playful. They were heavy with meaning, with warning, with temptation. I took one last step forward, stopping just shy of her. The air between us seemed alive. I didn't reach for her. I didn't touch. I just stood there, waiting, silently asking a question with my presence alone. Her breath caught, and for a fleeting instant, I thought she would close the distance. Her fingers twitched as though they wanted to reach for mine. But instead, she lingered in that space halfway between surrender and retreat, leaving the choice suspended in the silence that wrapped around us both. The silence between us felt alive, almost unbearable in its weight. Midnight loomed closer with every tick of the clock, each second reminding me of the line she had drawn, a line I was careful not to cross without her permission. She stood there, her hand still resting on the doorknob, her body turned slightly toward me. Her eyes, though, told the real story. They held me in place, unspoken questions flickering within them, a push and pull of desire and restraint. I didn't move closer. I didn't dare. Instead, I let the quiet speak for me. Finally, her lips curved, just barely, into the faintest smile. A smile not of certainty, but of surrender to the moment. She shook her head softly, as though amused by her own hesitation. And then, in a voice low enough that it almost melted into the hush of the house, she said, "You kept your promise." My heart jumped. The words were simple, but they carried all the meaning in the world. I stepped forward then, but only enough to close part of the distance. My hand found hers, tentative, careful, and when her fingers curled against mine, the rest of the world fell away. Her skin was warm, her grip light, but the connection sent a steady calm through me. I lifted her hand slowly, pressing a soft kiss against her knuckles. It wasn't bold, wasn't reckless. It was reverent, a quiet vow in itself. When I lowered her hand again, I saw the way her eyes glistened faintly in the low light. She exhaled, the tension in her shoulders softening. "You should go rest," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her, too gentle, too reluctant. I nodded, because I understood. Pushing further would have ruined what this moment already was. "Good night," I said softly, releasing her hand with a care that felt almost ceremonial. She lingered a second longer, her fingers brushing mine as if reluctant to let go. Then she opened the door, slipping inside. The door didn't slam, didn't close abruptly, it eased shut with a quiet click, leaving only the faint glow of her bedside lamp seeping through the crack beneath it. I stood there in the hallway for a while, heart still racing, lips still tingling with the warmth of her skin. The silence felt different now, not heavy, not uncertain, but full of something I couldn't quite name. When I finally walked back toward the guest room, my steps were light, unsteady in the best way. I knew nothing had been promised, nothing had been defined. But I also knew this wasn't over. As I lay down that night, I replayed her laugh, her touch, the way she'd said those words, "You kept your promise." And for the first time in a long while, I fell asleep not worried about tomorrow, but eager for it.